Hi, welcome to the Fit and Healthy Today show. I'm your host, Heike Turciano, and today I'll be presenting a segment on diabetes. First, I'd like to get through some of the technical kind of information regarding diabetes. There are two types of diabetes. First one is type 1 diabetes. It usually occurs at childhood. It's called juvenile diabetes. It's insulin dependent. It's where the pancreas does not produce adequate amounts of insulin. The most common form of type 2 diabetes, and the one that we're going to address the most today, is insulin resistant diabetes. 6 to 10% of our population has type 2 diabetes, with about 15% of the adult population. So it's an ever-growing crisis in our country. Insulin resistance, every muscle and liver cell, every cell in the body actually requires glucose to supply energy in order for it to perform its basic functions. The problem is with type 2 diabetes, these cells become insulin resistant. Insulin delivers glucose into the muscle tissues, the nerve tissues. Well, when you become insulin resistant, the muscles and the liver just don't respond to the insulin anymore, and then the blood sugars rise. So that's the kind of the technical type of stuff. The risk factors involved with diabetes are many, but these are probably the most common ones that I see every day. Heredity. Generally, when I see grandparents or parents have diabetes, oftentimes we'll see an earlier onset of type 2 diabetes. I also see it with people over the age of 40 more commonly, because they've eaten diets high in sugar, their exercise tends to be lagging, and they tend to have higher amounts of stress, which kind of mess around with their hormonal imbalances, that type of thing. Race is also an issue when we talk about risk factors. Black Americans are 2.5 to 3 times more likely to have type 2 diabetes, which is, and that seems to be an epidemic among the black population. When we're talking about things that we have control over, some of these other things we have no control over. The diet and the obesity rates in our country seem to be contributing majorly to the diabetic epidemic. Nutritional deficiencies, because the diets are, gee, I'm going to go off to fast food, got to race home, got to take the kids off to soccer practice. And as a result of that, we're finding that people are becoming very, very nutritionally deficient. They start gaining the weight, ever-expanding waistlines in both males and females. And what happens then is these fat cells hold 300 times more insulin receptors. So what that means is it blocks the body's ability, or the muscles, to absorb this insulin and sugars necessary to help the muscles and the nerve fibers work. So that's why oftentimes when we see people drop weight, we'll also notice too that their blood sugars will come down. The fat also blocks the circulation to the muscle tissues. So what happens then when you block that ability of the sugars to be able to reach the muscles is you end up with being very tired, the energies are low, you're going to get a rise in blood sugars, and you're just going to feel lousy. Then you end up with these types of things. Okay, these are the effects of what we see in diabetics, and they can start out relatively minor and then they rise with time. Initially, when you have diabetes, you may notice you get a little bit dizzy. Your blood sugars just kind of move up and down. They'll rise from extremes to lows. And under those circumstances, then people will sometimes grab sugar to kind of feel better. They'll notice they'll start urinating more. They just don't feel as good. They start gaining more weight and storing it usually around the middle areas. What we see with time occurs in diabetics is, and this is kind of a warning sign that's going to happen to you if you decide not to handle your diabetes on some of the things that I'll discuss later on. Neuropathy. That's where literally your nerves start to tingle, sometimes in a very painful fashion, and then eventually you can't feel anything at all. I see quite often a lot of issues with bladder, where people don't even know when they're fully emptying their bladder. They end up with a lot of digestion problems, to where their stomach doesn't even realize that the nerves won't even respond, so that the food can move on to the small intestine. So they end up with a lot of digestion issues. When you have high sugars, the sugars kind of eat away the vascular system, kind of like battery acid to the vascular system, and it causes vascular inflammation. That means the arteries become very, very jagged. They're not their nice, usual, smooth type of, like they should be. Well, what happens then is you get something called arteriosclerosis. Okay? That's a buildup of cholesterol, inflammation in the vascular system, and then of course 2 mineral deposits can lay on that vascular system, causing the arteries to narrow with time. Well, what then happens then is the circulation, or the blood circulation, narrows as well, and as obviously when you cut off the blood supply, then we see strokes and heart attacks. You can end up with generally anywhere from 2 to 3 times a stroke and heart attack risk when you have diabetes, because of all this vascular inflammation. When we combine poor circulation and nerve damage, look what we got here. We got impotence. So gentlemen who are coming to me in my stores saying to me at 35 that they're already having issues and they've been a diabetic for 5 years, this is a side effect. So anybody who knows they have a family history of diabetes needs to be readily aware that this can be a side effect that will come with diabetes. Eye disorders or circulatory types of issues with eyes. What happens is the eyes have these small little capillaries and little nerve fibers that send and communicate and circulate. Well, what happens then is, as we talked about, we get a narrowing of the vascular system, and when we get that, then that narrowing and then the damage to the vascular system, the eyes just don't get the circulation they need. So you end up with an increased risk in cataracts and other retinal disorders. So oftentimes with diabetics, I find one of the first things they claim or they know is, gosh, you know, I just don't see as good anymore. And I'll hear them say that, and I was like, okay, now how are your blood sugars doing? So that's probably one of the very first things I see as well. Mania, mood swings, anytime anybody's blood sugars are going all around or every in which direction, up, down, or extremely high, you're going to see a fluctuation in certain types of brain neurotransmitters and circulation to the brain itself. So it can cause mania, mood swings, thus necessitating maybe psychological evaluations and medications as well. So one thing leads to another. Since diabetics have such poor circulation, the increase in infection and the inability for wounds to heal is phenomenally increased. I mean, they can scratch themselves and it can take weeks to heal, or months. Whereas with us, you know, 3 or 4, 5 days, we're healed up. So obviously, then the whole purpose behind this lecture is when you have diabetes, your lifespan and your quality of life, as you can tell, dramatically drops. And so what I'm going to try to seek to do on the show today is to give you some hints on how you can lower the blood sugars and maybe reduce some of your, at least your diet and your weight risk factors. Okay, diet, major. Nowadays, everything in our society seems to be so quick. Kids are sent out the door with a bowl of cereal, the Pop-Tarts. Mom and Dad are grabbing the cup of coffee and a donut going out the door. And we're talking about very, very poor nutrition. And these nutritional deficiencies over a period of time, the body breaks down. We only have so much to go off of, and if you don't feed it, it breaks down just like a car. So the diet is very, very vital. When we talk about diet with diabetes, and probably one of the biggest hints that I can give is whenever you eat a carbohydrate, and it should not exceed 150 calories, I would strongly encourage using such things as protein, eggs, tuna, meat. There are options for protein, cheeses. So like a sample breakfast in the morning is if you want your slice of toast, then have a couple of scrambled eggs and 6 or 7 almonds or walnuts to go with it. You've got some fats and you've got some proteins and a little bit of fiber to slow the sugars down. The key is when you go out the door with all those carbohydrates, you send up the blood sugars, and then once again, then you have the issues with those side effects that I mentioned. So a sample lunch would be something like a nice big salad with some chicken on top. If you want to have an open-faced sandwich, pile it high with all the meats and onions and lettuce, all the good stuff. Maybe just sticking with the one slice of bread. So once again, I talk to people who follow the old food pyramid diet, and basically, I mean, they're getting 8 to 10 servings of carbohydrates in one day. And for a diabetic, I call that death mode, because what you're doing is you're keeping those sugars in an elevated form, and over a period of time, it's just going to cause more and more vascular and cellular damage. So very, very important. Just if you could just simplify as much as we possibly can, whenever you eat a carbohydrate, have a fat and a protein or some source of fiber to slow the sugars down. So if you're going to have your good old trusty apple, which is great, fiber, have a scoop of peanut butter to go with it. Something to slow those sugars down, okay? Exercise. I have a lot of customers who love to walk the Mission or get out and walk the hills, and it does help to lower the blood sugars. I have physicians recommending that their patients get more exercise to help lower their sugars and hopefully drop off some of the fat that contributes to this insulin resistance. What we're finding, however, though, is besides what is called aerobic exercise, that's, doing a good walking pace where your heart is moving but you can still talk, they're finding that anaerobic exercise, and when I saw the statistic, I was pretty amazed, 34 times more glucose is consumed than an aerobic exercise. So if you've got a local gym or you have a gym at home, or any type of resistance training, and another segment of our show, I'll show you a couple of exercises having to do an example of resistance training. That's where you're doing spurty types of exercise, where the heart rate really starts to go up and then it relaxes and then it goes up. So good old wind sprints are anaerobic, but weight training is probably one of the best anaerobic exercises. As far as medications, I'm not going to get into too much in that direction, because that's something that you have to discuss with your doctor. But I can say this, they do come with their side effects, and lifestyle changes, obviously either solely or in combination with medications, you'd want to discuss with your healthcare practitioner. Supplements. Now, I'm working on my doctorate in naturopathic medicine, and I want to review just a few supplements that I think could help you with your blood sugars, whether you're pre-diabetic or you're actually diabetic, be it type 1 or type 2. A good multiple vitamin, high in B vitamins. Those B vitamins really help reduce vascular inflammation. And there's certain tests that your doctor can run called CRP, C-reactive protein, and homocysteine that can check for some of this vascular inflammation, but the B vitamins really do help reduce that. And so a good multi, high in B vitamins, and be sure to have the quality up there as well. Talk to somebody who's knowledgeable in the industry about that. Chromium, particularly chromium percolinate or GTF chromium, 400 to 600 micrograms, helps lower the blood sugars and also improves insulin's efficiency to be delivered into the cells. Very important. Most of my physicians locally recommend about 200 to 300 micrograms twice a day. Very helpful. Vitamin C. Vitamin C helps with the collagen matrix, and when you help with the collagen matrix, it helps these little blood vessels, arteries, and veins maintain their elasticity. So when they maintain the elasticity, they don't get hardened, which also improves the circulation as well. Alpha-lipoic acid reduces blood sugars and also can help with some of that diabetic neuropathy that we talked about, that burning on the feet, or the nerve issues that we see with impotence. Vanadyl sulfate aids insulin's ability to move glucose into the cells. Kind of opens up those insulin receptors a little bit so that they can receive the sugars that are being delivered to them. There are other ones as well, cinnamon, garlic, aloe vera juice that can actually help lower the blood sugars and actually mildly increase insulin production, provided that the pancreas is in good functioning order. So these are ways to do that. With diabetics, we also see what's called nerve glycation. It's a dying of the nerve. It's a film that kind of forms around the nerve where it cannot feel or receive information anymore. There's a product called carnosine that reduces this glycation buildup on those nerve cells. Then there are other types of products as well, quercetin, bromelain, bitter melon, that I see some of the physicians recommending to help their clients with lowering sugars. Some of these products, literally, I've seen personally in owning health food stores, lowering sugars anywhere from 50 and sometimes 100 points. So, you know, in combination, depending on what your side effects are, based upon descriptions, and you can do some of your own research or talk to a knowledgeable healthcare professional about supplements as well. This is the end of our segment pertaining to diabetes. We're going to move on to our next segment, which is a few strength training movements that can help some of those saggy arms and maybe help the arms look a little bit prettier. Hi, welcome to the fitness segment of this show. I want to show you a couple of exercises to help tone the biceps and the tricep muscles. Very simple, basic exercises. You can either utilize a standard weight, or you can utilize something simple around home like a water bottle. The first exercise I'd like to show you works for the flabbies in the wind, as some of my older customers put it. This little muscle down here, triceps are what these muscles are called down here. And they're supposed to have a nice, pretty little cut, non-flabby type of look. And an exercise that I do and have done as a trainer and showed other people as a trainer is a simple exercise in which you bend over and you secure yourself right on a table, and you kick this back. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get this muscle to harden and to hold a little stiff. If you have relatively little strength, you can grab something like a can or a water bottle, and the key is just to kick it back and to kind of hold it there for about 15 or 20 repetitions. And be sure to work the other arm. We like to be able to have balance in our weight training. Also, too, to get a nice balanced arm, we like to hit, and that's bodybuilding terms or weightlifting terms, we like to work the bicep muscles for balance as well, because you want it to look pretty and balanced. Standard bicep, and once again, you can either use a nice weight, and you just simply have it next to your arm in this fashion, and you curl it up, okay? And you want to keep your wrist nice and straight, okay? None of this flopping the stuff around with the wrists. And once again, you can grab 2-pounders or 3-pound weights, and in other segments in the show, I'll show you how to use bands. But if you just simply curl up with whatever weight you can and kind of squeeze the muscle at the top of the action, then what you're going to get is you're going to get a nice, pretty little bit of bump here, so it looks like, once again, that it's just not a flabby type of muscle. And that concludes the fitness portion of our Fit and Healthy Today show. Next, we will have research analyst Ralph Turchiano filling us in on some of the latest research out there. Hi, welcome to the research segment of our show. I'd like to introduce Ralph Turchiano, our research analyst, for some latest, greatest information available to the public.
Hi, my name is Ralph, as she introduced, and the information I'd like to present to you is research that anyone can do. This information that's open out there, you have the internet, you have the newspaper. Just don't believe me or take my word for these things, but actually reinforce my data by researching yourself. The first thing I'd like to open up with is basically some warnings out there and things that we take for granted which aren't necessarily in our environment anymore. The first one I'd like to bring to your attention is iodine. All right, now since we iodized salts in the 1920s and 30s, we haven't had much of a problem with iodine deficiencies. However, with the reduction of iodine in our feedstock, with the reduction in iodine in our baking, and the replacement of iodine in 1982 with bromides, and the reduction of iodine in our salt, our iodine levels have been declining. This is important because it's responsible not only for metabolism, but for proper brain development of our children. The Environmental Science and Technology Services just recently did an analysis of the iodine in our salt supply, which right now is only one of the remaining supplies of iodine in our diet. They discovered, out of the 88 samples that they took, over 47 of them did not meet the requirements for iodine at any level. Keep that in mind. Also, at the same time, too, many prenatals and postnatal vitamins do not have the iodine necessary for proper brain development of our children. The second part I'd like to get into is basically something in regards to prostate health. Now, this is going to kind of turn the prostate world on its ears. The first thing I'd like to bring to your attention, and it is important, over 18 studies that the National Cancer Institute had done since January 29th, they found that testosterone, which was normally seen as a main antagonist in prostate cancer, had no relationship whatsoever. They looked at over 6,438 controls and found testosterone nor estrogen played an impact on prostate cancer whatsoever. In fact, the Dr. Paul Godley, basically of University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, stated, "It is time to get out of this hypothesis and move on with the difficult task of analyzing and characterizing more modifiable risk factors." Which leads us to the next story. Basically, University of Rochester had discovered, since testosterone had dropped out of the picture, they found an interesting relationship between zinc and cadmium. Now, what they did is they noticed that zinc on its own really didn't impact prostate cancer much at all. What they did discover is this. When a person had high cadmium levels in the blood, this is a metal which is normally found in pesticides, around farming areas, of course, smoking, food preservatives, and paints. When cadmium levels were elevated and zinc levels were low, prostate cancer was on the rise. They found out zinc's relationship to this issue was simple. Zinc stimulated the production of a protein which took cadmium out of the body. And that's what made the big difference in basically reducing prostate cancer scores. Men who had high cadmium, low zinc, had a higher risk and incidence of prostate cancer. Men that had high zinc, moderate cadmium, or high cadmium had a much lower risk, as the body was able to handle the cadmium toxicity. They looked at over 219,000 cases to review that. After that, what I look at too, when we're talking about other issues, is also in regards to dementia. Folic acid, for example. Once, off to the side note, say not having much of a difference in regards to cardiovascular issues and things along those lines. Well, they discovered that men who had low folic acid levels were over triple the risk of developing dementia. They looked at 518 people between 2001 and 2003. This article came out in the Journal of Neurology, Neurosurgery, and Psychiatry. They discovered that it played a major role in whether people had dementia or not. Now, another one that came out of the Journal of American Academy of Neurology. Let me give you a hypothesis here, and you fill in the blanks. All right, out of 118 people who took the supplement called ginkgo biloba, out of the people who took it and the people who took the placebo, 14 individuals who took the placebo basically developed dementia past the age of 85. 7 of the people who basically took the placebo, did not take the placebo, took the ginkgo, developed dementia. Basically, you had half the people reduced the risk of basically developing dementia that took the ginkgo. So basically, 14 people took placebo, developed dementia, only 7 took the ginkgo. They also discovered the people that were actually taken on a regular basis had a 68% reduction overall in dementia. However, the headline to the story from the Journal of American Academy of Neurology was ginkgo had no impact. You fill in the title and the topic sentence in that one. I'm not going to try to figure it out on its own. But they have the data in the study, February 27th, 2008. That study just came out yesterday. Now, for the more disconcerting news in regards to basically our environment as far as health. This came out basically in the approval of a medication that was designed for breast cancer. Now, take a scenario. You're head of the FDA. You're the FDA commissioner. You have a cancer drug which is seeking approval. It did not extend life expectancy. More people died that took it than didn't take it. Had toxic side effects and cost the user or the insurance company over $100,000 a year. Your FDA advisors advised against approving it. So what would you do in that situation? Sounds like a pretty slam dunk situation all around to me. No, FDA approved it, which is going to make a real interesting case because a lot of people are now beginning to worry that the FDA lowered their standards. Worried except for one group, the finance markets. And I say, quote, they responded in this like, investors had become worried that a more conservative FDA was going to start demanding overall survival data before approving any cancer treatments. That is considered to be a much higher bar than progression of free survival data or time patients live without their disease advancing. That means the drug doesn't have to help you live longer, does not have to help you live healthier. It just means that they were concerned that the FDA was going to start expecting results from some of these cancer medications. This is something to remember about this medication called Avastin. Keep in mind for yourself and your family, because guess what? Unless you research the information yourself and look into it, no one's going to help you on this. You've got to help yourself.
Thank you very much, Ralph. I appreciate your time in your research. Very worthwhile information. Thank you. And very disconcerting to hear how the FDA, who should be protecting the public, doesn't seem to be protecting at all. And this in light of other data and information that we've received. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us in Fit and Healthy today. We appreciate, we hope that this show offers you both information and pushes you to research further more information to help yourself. Thank you very much.